Hi. So, since I talked about the source of happiness last time, I thought something connected to it. And again, this is not a medical lecture. So, this is a more of my own personal thought process rather than a true medical information. So, don't look at this as a medical fact or information that I'm going to give it to you. The question that arose in my own mind is, where is the memory stored? So where do we store our memories? And of course, one of the fascinating facts that I see is that if I'm looking at something, say I'm looking at an apple, and the light rays reflect from apple through my eyes to the retina. From retina, it goes through the nerve called optic nerve to the brain, usually the posterior part of the brain called occipital lobe. And there, the image is formed, transferred. However, my question is, how is the image transferred into a word or through the electrical impulses? How is actually the image reflected into the brain cells as being an apple? So there has to be a memory for us to recognize an apple, and then we must be matching it to some extent. But if you look at it, the electrical activity in the cells in the occipital lobe or the brain are going to be exactly the same thing, whether I'm looking at an apple or an orange, just to kind of have a fun. So if I'm looking at A person and A person B, the electrical impulses that come because of that are going to be pretty much similar. So how is an electrical impulse different when I'm looking at an apple or an orange or a banana? And how does the brain recognizes it? Because where does it match that I had seen this before and it was called apple? Especially if you're looking at a child who is told this is apple, that is banana. How is it and where is it stored to match up those reflections? Because the electrical activity in the brain would be exactly the same thing. So the thought comes in that it is stored somewhere in the mind, maybe, or intellect, maybe. So where do we pull this from? Is it actually a concrete anatomical stuff that it is stored in? Like some people feel that our memory is in hippocampus or certain areas of the brain. Or is it actually in the things that we cannot see, like mind or intellect, or in Indian philosophy, chitta? So I truly don't know, but I certainly know that the memories are carried from time to time, which means I had seen you yesterday and I see you today, I'll recognize you, hopefully. And same thing holds true about if I had eaten pizza yesterday or 8 days ago and somebody brings in pizza, it will jog my memory not only as to the appearance of the pizza, but also the smell related to the freshly baked pizza and also the taste of the freshly baked pizza. So essentially, we have multiple sources of inputs, the five that everyone knows, the five organs of perception, and they do go somewhere in the brain, but from somewhere in the brain, the memory is stored at some other place where my eyes or my smell or my taste can differentiate between the taste of pizza and the taste of donut. So how is this done? Because the cells in the brain that would be stimulated when I put something in my mouth or an aroma goes through my nose are going to be exactly the same thing. They're not different. And that's where the mind, intellect, chitta comes in. I have probably an additional thought process, and that's where now I'm crossing or transcending the lives. So, as I said, if I had had pizza 8 days ago and again have it today, it will be stored. But let's say I tested a dish in Italy when I visited Italy 10 years ago. There is no way, correction, there may be a very hard way for me to remember the dish, even the appearance, the aroma, the taste, etc. So somewhere this memory fades away. And we know what happens in dementia. And people have talked about tau protein and this and that develops and it wipes out memory. I'd seen an article or read something on computer or YouTube that when LED light sparkling was stimulated to the mice, they started having better memory. The memory that was so-called lost was regained. And again, some of this was transient, but it definitely persisted. So they stimulated certain parts. They just put, instead of stimulating actually the brain, in next experiment, in the first one, they of course had electrode in the brain of the mice. But in the next one, they actually just had a flashing LED lights at a certain frequency. And this stimulation with these lights improved the memory in mice. The unfortunate problem with that experiment is that even though we are 85% similar in our genetic composition as mice, many experiments that have been successful in mice have failed miserably in human beings. So something like that may or may not be the future of the memory. But I want to go beyond this particular life. I want to go to the next life and the next life. I've seen parents who have 2 kids brought under the same environment, and one kid loves spicy food, the other one loves sweets. How does this happen? Or we have seen sometimes 2 kids who are born in the same family have a different musical aptitude. And of course, we have always seen surprising videos on YouTube where, or even for that matter, many of the TV shows where young child, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old, is playing an instrument like piano or performing, singing at such a masterly level that it'll be difficult to imagine something that could occur with just the training in a short time in this life, because these are young kids. So I have a strong feeling that the memories of skills or what we have learned, whether it is simple identification of apple or identifying pizza and remembering the taste and the shape and the aroma, it is more than that. We also retain what we learned, not just what we saw and smelled and tested, but what we learned. For example, if we have learned a music, or if you have learned to do a meditation, or if you have learned to cook or developed a bad habit, or learned to smoke, learned to have excessive alcohol, these are stored in an impression form, in an abstract form, somewhere in which is not a physical body, because as everybody knows, the physical body dies when we die. So these impressions of, say, memories of learned music, ability to sing, ability to play an instrument, these are all stored somewhere, and that's where the Indian or Hindu philosophy comes in. There is an astral body and there is a causal body, and these memories are stored in an astral brain. So there is a replica of our physical body, which is called astral body. It has eyes and ears and nose and chest and a brain. Because there is a lack of physical element, it cannot do anything physically, and so it completely works on a so-called physical astral way, or the memories. It cannot test a new food as I can see it, because the testing is done only by physical tongue. So it depends on a memory. This memory is stored, and when we are reborn with the abstract form of a memory, which means if I loved alcohol, I will love alcohol in my next life. If I have a love for sweet things, I will have a love for sweet thing in my next life, though the environment will control as to what kind of sweet things are available, and environment will determine what kind of sweet things I would like to eat in that particular life. So the memory is stored somewhere in this life, in mind or intellect or chitta, but it is carried from life to life in an astral body. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Please subscribe if you like it. Have a nice day.